And we're live once again with NX Office Hours. Thanks to everyone again. We pushed this one a day back, because at least here in the U.S. we were celebrating Independence Day over the weekend, so we gave everybody extra day to get back into the regular swing of things. So we're doing it on a Tuesday now, but like I said, NX Office Hours, where we answer questions about people that haven't used NX, or even ones that have used NX, to get our opinions on many different topics that people are interested in, and questions that we've gotten submitted from Slack and on Twitter, and just around the social media. So if you have questions on Twitter, use the the NXQA hashtag. Or you can, if you're in the chat room, you can ask questions there, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And if we can't answer a question today, then we'll get an answer and get back with you on that. As you can see of our handles, Brandon T. Roberts on Twitter, and we'll go ahead. People already know who you are, Isaac, but you can go ahead and introduce yourself anyway.
All right, I'm Isaac, and I'm on Twitter at @ManIsaac, and yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is exciting to see, all the community that's growing up around these office hours, and it's fun to join and answer some questions.
Yeah, definitely. I know our Slack channel has been blowing up with a lot of people that have joined there, to even whether it's just support questions or just learning more about NX in general. So definitely a growing community there.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess with that, we'll get into it, or some of the questions that we had already, and then we'll get to the other ones as we go during the session. You got to get those tweets out, live tweets. So our first one is, how do you organize your libs folder with having multiple frameworks? An example being Angular and NestJS. I guess I'm wondering if they need to actually make that separation based on the framework, as far as organization goes.
Right. Okay. First off, you can organize your monorepo any way you want. That's everything we say from here on out is going to be a recommendation, and do what you want with your own.
We got to have hard rules that everybody has to do. We can't.
You must do this. We will find you. We will track down your code, and you'll be out of the club. But anyway, so the general recommendation is to you start off flat, and then as you get more code in your code base, you can start to have another level of folders. You can do a folder per application. So you've got, I don't know, like a different websites or whatever. And so you do a folder for that application with all the libs inside of there that have to do with that application. And then another folder for a second application. And then you can have a folder for shared libraries that are used by both applications, or multiple applications. So in that case, say you've got an Angular app and a NestJS app. So you would have like a folder for named after whatever the name of the Angular app, and then a folder named after whatever the name of the Nest app, and then you could have a shared folder. And then if you have more Nest applications or more Angular applications, then you'd have different folders for those other applications. If you need to specify that this is Angular code and this is Nest code, and don't try to mix them, I would differentiate those with tags in the nx.json file, and then you could have like linting rules that say that an Angular library can't depend on Nest code because it just doesn't make sense, and say that they can both depend on shared code but not on cross frameworks.
Yeah, so your recommendation is don't get too bogged down in layering of folders, and instead use use tags to more enforce those rules than as far as folders go.
Yeah, so like folders don't prevent you from, depending on things, whereas tags can actually enforce those restrictions if you want to. But then, yeah, I don't see a lot of benefit in having a folder called Angular or a folder called Nest.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because the moment you need to use, let's say you want to use your NestJS with your Angular and your, some other, application, then you kind of get into, I guess you could get into a weird space of, in the beginning you just had a Nest app, but now you're like using it across two different apps that could be Angular and React, but now it's kind of confusing of how you've named them. So it's more or less to name them in a way that what their like purpose is. So I think, well, I know that you've done a few NX apps, or organized a few NX apps previously. Is that your like go-to for keeping them flat that way? Is just the top level, maybe 2 levels deep, like the apps libs, and then application folder, and then libs under that? Is that your kind of
yeah, so you'd go libs, and then name of the application, and then each library name. Most applications don't go deeper than that, but some giant ones need to, but most of them don't need to go deeper than that.
Yeah, I would say, unless you have a well, I guess we're dealing with large apps anyway, but most humongous apps want more granularity, so they may have deeper, maybe one level deeper than that as far as libraries are, folders for libraries. But like I said, I agree in general that you should try to keep things as flat as possible. And I think that's like a good general rule. Like even like just going back to the Angular style guide, or even the React style guides from like React that I've seen, they want you to keep things as flat as possible so that developers don't have to dig and hunt for things. So I think it's
right. I mean, grouping things is helpful to some degree. But once you get 7 layers deep, then it ceases being useful, and it becomes just painful to try to find anything.
And you just have to use like Command P and or in VS Code or whatever your IDE of choice, and try to drill down that way. But then you get the length of the file runs off the screen, and then you got another problem. Right.
I'm imagining Java code bases where you have more folders than files.
Yeah, so I think we got that question answered pretty well there. And so we'll cover this one. This is came from the chat room, or it came from the chat room. Data persistence used to memoize responses to queries by ID. If so, did that get removed? And we checked on this, and that functionality is still there. I'm going to bring up the docs here. So if you're seeing something different, then we can talk about that also. But as far as using the fetch, this is just an example from the docs using the fetch operator that comes with data persistence. And this is a different example because it doesn't use the data persistence service, but the operators that the data persistence service uses are still there. So as you can see here, the fetch operator, can take an ID that it can use where you return an ID from your model to group the responses that come back from the run function. So that option is still there to group those by ID. It just maybe looks slightly different because we're not injecting the data persistence service in favor of using the like I said, the operators that come with the narwhals or the Angular plugin for NX. See, that was a good good question. I know we kept the data persistence libraries, like I said, still there. We just use our examples just reflect using a different operator now.
Nice.
So next question, I think I saw this one on the Slack channel. Is it possible to have dependencies scoped to a library? And is this an anti-pattern? And I think we've gotten this question before of having like a single package JSON versus multiple package JSONs under each application. And you can, like I said, you can jump in here and
yeah, so I think a lot of people ask about this because they're used to other like monorepo management tools like Lerna, or I think other ones also do something like this, where you have multiple package JSONs for each application, and so it is an anti-pattern as far as NX is concerned, because you give up the idea of having a single version for every third party. So you have multiple versions of Angular, or multiple versions of React, or multiple versions of whatever third party tool you're using. And so you could write, so that the reason that's a problem is you could write some shared code that works for one version of your framework, but not for the other. And then it gets bundled with app 1 and it works, and it gets bundled with app 2 and it doesn't work. And it's the same exact code, but it doesn't work in one place because the version is different of your third party framework or whatever. So that's the reason why that's an anti-pattern, is because it makes it difficult to share that code, because you're not staying consistent across your whole monorepo. The other issue with that is you end up, even if there's not a problem with shared code, there'll always be certain applications that are not as well maintained as other ones. Mm-hmm. And so if you end up leaving parts of your code base behind, then it's going to be really painful to bring them back up to date whenever you do go back and have to fix something in them. So it's, as long as you keep everything up to date and you keep everything moving along together, it's a relatively simpler process than trying to pull something up like six major version bumps. Now, saying that, it is possible to do some of this if you're like writing a library that you're going to publish inside of NX. You can specify in the package JSON for that library. So NX will generate a package JSON that gets published to NPM that says which dependencies it needs and what peer dependencies it needs. And you can specify the version numbers there, but that doesn't change. That doesn't control what's installed locally on your dev machine. That just controls what gets published to NPM as the requirements of what other people need to download.
Yeah, Eric, because like you said, going back to that, the moment your apps branch off to different versions, it's like whichever one doesn't get updated first, like immediately starts to die. Like, I don't want to say starts to die, but it starts to wither. Because because upgrades sometimes just get, so like some apps are not as straightforward to upgrade as others. So if you upgrade the easier app first, and then, well, I'll just upgrade the more difficult app later, then later turns into 6 months, and now you're two versions behind, or even 3 versions behind, and then it just gets harder and harder to stay in line. So the one version policy helps everyone to stay in line and keep moving forward, so that, like I said, you don't get into that issue to where you get too far behind, or whether you were doing this in multiple repos. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's bring that one. So our next question is, and we've talked about, I guess, with one thing that we recently introduced was NX plugins, where you can create a set of a plugin that has all your schematics, migrations, and builders that you want to package up and add like as a standalone NX plugin. And we have many of those in our just community-based ones that are our community ecosystem in that way has really grown. But the question was, can you execute schematics from a plugin that you've created in the same workspace?
Yeah. So there. So in general, so there's a concept of workspace schematics, which is not a plugin. Workspace schematics are created so that it makes it easy to run those schematics directly from the same workspace. And then plugins are created so that it makes it easy to publish schematics and builders to be used outside of your workspace. Now, it is possible to execute a schematic from a plugin that you're working on the same workspace. It's just difficult and not. So we have there's an issue out there, a feature request to make this easier, and I can look that up, but I'll look that up in a bit. But basically, the workaround for now is you can build your plugin and then run the schematic from the dist folder. Let me.
Okay, well, it seems like a pretty straightforward, at least workaround for now. I know, and there, just to take a step back, there may be some people who don't use workspace schematics, but just to give a general definition of what those are, if you're used to using the Angular CLI and you use ng generate or ng generate component or a module or service, then you're executing a schematic there. And what workspace schematics are schematics that come within your NX workspace that are within the tools folder. So you can generate a workspace schematic within that tools folder using NX, and then you can actually run that schematic directly from your workspace. Because if you were using those schematics normally, you have to compile them down to JavaScript. You have to compile them down from TypeScript to JavaScript so that you can execute them. And there's also some other setup you have to do with managing like the collection of how the schematics are registered. And the workspace schematic command within NX handles that for you. So you don't have to doing that additional setup. You can run them directly from there. And then, like I said, mention the schematics from a plugin is just, like I said, a packaged way to bundle up schematics or other things that you want to put together from within your workspace. And like I said, you can do those in two different ways. You can generate them as a standalone, generate your plugin as a standalone workspace if you're planning on maybe open sourcing it as a library, or you can generate a plugin that you've created within the context of your own workspace, like you would do another library.
Yeah, I can. Let me share my screen so I can show what that workaround looks like.
Sure.
Application window, that one. There we go. So if you had your plugin called my plugin, you could do nx build my plugin, and that would, this is not going to actually do anything, but that would build it into the dist folder, and then you could run your schematic doing normally you do nx generate my org my plugin, and then the name of the schematic here. But instead of doing this namespace, you can do an actual relative path here and do /dist/my plugin, and have that go to the path, the folder that contains the package JSON of your compiled my plugin, and that will run your schematic. So the reason this is not a perfect workaround is because anyone who uses the schematic has to build the plugin and then execute off the dist folder. So it's kind of a painful workaround. Whereas there's NX workspace schematic, which you can just run like this, and then no one has to do that compile step. Now, on the other hand, if you want to use a builder that's in your local plugin, that's fairly straightforward because you can set it in the angular.json here. And here, where this builder is set up, instead of having this namespace here, you can do the same kind of thing of libs, my plugin, and have a relative file path here. And this you can check into Git. And so anyone who uses this doesn't need to know that it's local. They can just run their normal command and use it that way. So those are the two workarounds. So builders locally to a local plugin is pretty easy and straightforward. Schematics are a little bit more difficult, and we'll let you know when we've got a better workaround for that.
Yeah, like you said, there was a feature request for it, so I think we're at least in the process of looking to how we can make that easier for that you don't have to do the workarounds. Make that process easier to generate that.
Yeah, here we go. I'm going to paste the link for the issue in the YouTube chat.
Okay. Yeah, we'll add, just to mention that we'll add these links to the items discussed during the office hours to the show notes so that you can go back and see them on YouTube and see what we were discussing during the session. So this is a good question. Is the NX community Slack open to anyone or only to paying subscribers? Yes, ooh. For the low cost of
you send money to Brandon's checking account.
No, don't send it to me. Send it to Jeff. There you go. To Jeff and Victor, and they'll send you the secret invite code. But no, seriously, the community Slack for NX is open to anyone, whether you're using NX or employing Narwhal to use NX or not. So, like I said, I think we have over 500 people in the Slack channel now, and there's channels for support. And if you want to talk about the NX repo itself on how you can contribute, then that's definitely something you can take advantage of. Just want to be specific that it's free and free of charge. So, like I said, if you want to talk to us about how we can help you use NX within your organization, then that's a separate discussion outside of the community Slack channel.
I think the link on the nx.dev/NX community, the link to join it is expired. So we need to update that link.
We did have a PR yesterday. We do have to update that one. We do have a PR that updated the link on the README for the NX, and I will bring it up in the GitHub README. We just had one that fixed that.
Awesome.
So I know that one works because I was the one that looked at the PR. But yeah, if you go down, I believe down here in the Slack and Narwhal community, then you'll get the link to there. So we're trying to make, like I said, updating that also to where when that link expires, because the Slack link only lasts so long, and then we have to update the link. So, and there's also a link shared in the chat room. So I'll show that here quickly, and we'll add that to the show notes also, so that you can visit that. So we have Bram in the chat room. He says hearing Isaac is like having live egghead videos. So you guys have egghead fans in the egghead video fans in the chat.
Hold on. Let me. I can type my keyboard so you can hear my keyboard typing.
There you go.
There you go.
You get the live authentic experience. So yeah, we'll go through and saw another one here in the channel or in the chat room here, and it's kind of broken up into a few ones. So we'll kind of go through it. It says if I have a bounded context with a data access library that contains part of the store, I cannot import data access library and all feature libs related to its context. And then it goes on to say because it only has the same amount of slice, or can only import the same slice once. And I'm guessing this is using store.for feature with NGRX. So the question is, where do I import the library? I separate the store from data services in different libs and import the lib with the slice of the store in a feature shell. So I guess this is talking about like separating your NGRX state versus your data access library that uses that state. And what I recommend in that scenario is if your NGRX state is separate and you want to access it across basically your entire application, then if you have it in a standalone lib, then I would move it as high as possible in the like hierarchy of your modules or your features. So if it's something that should be used across your entire app, then, and even if you have it in a standalone library, I would import it and add it to the feature module or add it to your app module imports, even if you're using just store.for feature, because it's a standalone library. And that way your store is always accessible, regardless of which features and library depends on it. There are some, like I said, the other side of that is whether you have like multiple features that depend on that piece of state, and you want to make sure that it gets loaded, that it's loaded whenever those other features are loaded. And in that case, I would use that standalone state library and import it, consume it within the shared across those multiple features. That way, whichever one of those features gets loaded first, there you'll be ensured that that piece of state is loaded with each one of those particular features. So it just depends on, to me, it just depends on how high, I guess, high up in the hierarchy or at the feature level where you want that feature to be loaded.
So you're saying, so one option is to make a smaller library that contains just the store features state, and then load that from import that for all the services that need it, all the other libraries that need it. And what was the first option?
The first one was to, as far as the state is concerned, like basically eagerly load the eagerly load the feature slice.
Okay.
Like if those data access libraries need it, then you would.
And if you do the second option of having it in its own separate library, will it only get loaded once? Because it sounds like they have some code that's gonna needs to only run one time. So if it gets referenced multiple times, it'll still only get loaded once.
Yes, the store, even if you use store.for feature for a particular slice more than one time, it'll only get registered once, or it'll register that same piece of state, but it won't like reset your state or modify it in any way. And the same with effects. Effects, you can register effects across multiple features, but when they're registered, they only get registered once. And it's doing that internally in the store library and in the effects library, so that you can be sure that no matter how many times, this is out of the box, there is a way to control like the uniqueness of an effects library, but that's more an advanced use case that you can go to the docs and find to get the effects, basically the effects identifier. So if you want to register the same effects class more than once. But it's a good question. So let's see. Like I said, if you have questions if you ask questions on Twitter, I'm going to check the Twitter hashtag here. Same thing there is okay. So we'll go back through the channel here. And I think I answered this one. And we'll talk about like what's coming up with NX later on. So I think that'll probably cover some of these questions. But one question was, when I'm using NX to publish Angular libraries as NPM packages, are we still supposed to disable Ivy in Angular version 10? We read that in Angular version 10, we could enable Ivy, but I can't find any new info. And as far as I know, as far as Ivy is concerned, you should still be publishing your packages with Ivy turned off, even if your app is running within Ivy mode, because the way I understand it works today is that the NGCC compiler will update even if your library is compiled for a view engine, it will rewrite that some of your library to not rewrite your library, but modify some of the parts of your library so that it's compatible with Ivy, so that it works in both, works with both compilers. But I think the general recommendation today is to still compile your apps, publish your libraries using view engine compiler. And I think that actually when you try to build a library and you don't have Ivy disabled, it will give you a warning that you should disable it for now. So that could change at some point in the future. But at least for today, with publishing libraries, you should still build those with Ivy turned off.
So I have a question for that question asker. Why are you on Angular 10 inside of an NX repo when we haven't released NX 10 yet?
You know, some people want to be on like the bleeding edge. Like, I'm going to take the leap and go to an Angular version 10. Yeah,
there was a question earlier. I think Lance Finney near the beginning, it was asking when NX v10 is coming out.
Yep, I'll bring that up here since you mentioned it. Do you have estimate for version 10? And I'm looking forward to upgrade our Angular app to Angular version 10. And I'll say, as with anything else, the answer is soon. I think since the official version 10 of Angular has launched, I think last time we were within like a day or so of releasing NX version 9.
Has Angular 10 launched? I thought it was.
Yes, it launched.
Yeah,
I guess this is the second week since it's been launched. But yeah, the NX version 10, I think we're wrapping up. Well, we have to do some testing to make sure that the migrations and things are solid, because there are some things that change with the like the structure of a CLI project that we're testing and making sure that those work. But I would say soon, pretty soon. I can't give you a concrete date because we want to make sure that we do our due diligence. But it's definitely,
we're working on it.
Yeah, it's definitely in the process. You can, of course, always check the GitHub repo to see. We have a branch that's already out there that's working on upgrading everything to Angular version 10, and then we'll kind of proceed from there. So be checking out for that. Okay, let's see. So yes, everybody's waiting on version 10. And I think, well, at least we know that you can upgrade to Angular version 10. You can take the leap. I can't recommend this, but you can take the leap and upgrade your Angular libraries to version 10 and build that way. But we'll have some official support soon.
Yeah.
So this was another question I got. Are there any best practices for maintaining separate releases for applications inside a monorepo, or do they have to be coordinated together?
Yeah, so there's nothing about having your code in the same that requires you to keep the code releasing at the same time. So you can make a nx deploy command and run that whenever you decide it makes sense for your organization. So just because the code lives together doesn't mean it has to be released at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like I said, I guess the part that maybe takes a little, or the part that maybe you have to think about a little more is, like if you're, I guess, how do you do like the branching and the tagging of those applications?
Yeah.
They would essentially be they could be in two different points, but I think those would be something that you could manage, or you'd have to decide how you're going to manage that, because you can always branch off and then I'm thinking you branch off and you kind of merge some of those or cherry pick some of those commits that have landed since you branched off into those basically release branches. If you look at it that way, and that way you can still move your repo along and have your snapshot of your branch at a certain point in time for those particular releases.
Yeah, that's true. Because if you're in the process of, like, you want to lock things down for a day or two to do, or however long it takes you to do your QA cycle, you have a release branch for that, so that your underlying code doesn't get changed out from under you,
right?
While you're testing it. Then yeah, making a release like that makes sense.
Yep. Another good question. Let's see. This one is another question. Why do you use rollup for buildable libraries, whereas webpack is used everywhere else? Be nice to have webpack as an option so that we don't have to keep our lib compatible with webpack and rollup. And I think this is more the majority of, I guess, package libraries use. Let me get this span off of here. There we go. I don't know if ever like an intentional choice of using rollup for buildable libraries versus webpack. I'm pretty sure it probably is more efficient about tree shaking the things that you don't use in your buildable library, so that you're only shipping that particular set of code. So I suppose if you wanted to use webpack as an option, I would say there is probably a way to use webpack as an option today. You just have to write your own builder for it to use webpack to roll up use webpack to bundle up your library for distribution. But the standard way that we have out today is to use rollup for buildable libraries. Good question, though. I'll say if it's not supported out of the box, usually there's an extension point that is within an NX workspace that you can take advantage of if you want to roll something in a different way.
Yep.
All right. Another question. My team is building a web app with React and an Electron app that needs to share DTOs. I'm guessing these are DTOs or data transfer objects. I'm guessing that's what that is, but I haven't seen it.
Like a API, like a Swagger definition of what the server is sending or something, or?
Yeah, maybe so. If maybe they can clarify what the question is, but I'm going to say they're using something to, I'm thinking of data access objects, but DTOs to me are things that just transform data from one format to another.
Okay.
But yeah, it says this, if it's not exist today, I don't think you need a plugin. I guess I don't think you need a plugin for this. I think that if you're sharing between a React and Electron app, then whatever you generate into a library is something that you can share between the two things. I don't think you need a specific plugin to to do that. Someone mentioned in the chat room, or Eric mentioned in the chat room, it's like interfaces.
Yeah.
So if you have like shared API interfaces between the two applications, I would say that you don't need a plugin to do that. You just generate a library that has your API interfaces in, or not API interfaces, but your DTOs or interfaces in it. And you share that library between your React app and your Electron app, as long as they're both, of course, both written in TypeScript, because you can use React with vanilla.
Yeah.
Too.
And then, I mean, the benefit of that is that you have your affected graph. Anytime that API changes, your tests will run on both the React and the Electron app, and then your tests will fail if you update one and you don't update the other. So you know that your DTOs are going to be in sync across both applications.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think he clarified. He was saying, is there an Electron plugin? Is there an NX plugin for Electron?
Okay.
And there isn't one currently, and I think at least somebody was working at one point in time. Somebody was working on a plugin for this, a community plugin, but I'm not sure if it's actively being developed right now or not. I know we have ones for React and Ionic, and even Capacitor, I know, was a new one. It just came out recently.
Yeah, I know XPlat, I think.
Yeah, that would be another good one to recommend for Electron.
Yeah. I haven't used it recently, but it mentions that it uses supports Electron and Ionic, and yeah, there we go. Native script, all three of those things.
Yep. If you're using, like I said, this was built on top of NX workspaces, and like I said, Electron, Ionic, and even native script. And I think recently the in-studio team, I believe, took over the development and progress of native script.
Nice.
I think they still have some stuff in the works there, but definitely something you should check out as in studio for Electron support. So yeah, there isn't an official one for NX now, but if you want to get Electron, you can use InStudio, or if you want to go down the route of building your own NX plugin, you can do that also.
Yep.
And I'll bring up the plugins page just because we have guides for that. We have, like I said, we have our core set of NX plugins, and we have our community plugins that are listed here. If you go to nx.dev/nx-community, and these are just a few of the ones that have been published and added to our list. But I'm pretty sure there are plenty more out there that you can take advantage of. And we have a guide on how you can create your own NX plugin.
Yep. And if you're working on a plugin, actively working on one, you can ask to be added to join the Slack channel. And there's a private channel for people who are working on plugins to bounce ideas off each other and stuff. So.
Yep. We also have, I believe we're still doing this. We also have office hours for NX plugins and plugin authors in addition to the Slack channel. So I believe that's still a thing. So another question: what is conceptually the difference between build libs from source and with deps? Is it ever possible to not consume buildable libs from source, aka from dist within apps in the monorepo? So build libs from source. If you have a buildable library today and I say the use the term buildable and publishable like interchangeably, at least right now. But if you have a buildable library today, then each time you want to consume that library, it needs to be built first. And of course, we take care of some of this with local caching, but sometimes you even like if you're wanting to use the local version, you say you only want to use the source. You still want to use the source version, even if it's a buildable library. So the build from libs from source will always use the code library that's in, or the library that's in your repo, instead of using the build option that's in your dist folder. So the deps option looks for that library and that library's dependencies. So if you make a change to that library and you want to rebuild the things that depend on it also, then with deps will give you a larger, from what I understand, with deps will give you a larger graph of the affected libraries that should be built.
Okay, so say you have app1 and it depends on lib.a, which is a buildable library, but lib.a also depends on lib.b. So, and the lib.b also has to be a buildable library. So if you do nx build app1 with deps, it will build all three, the app, the lib.a, and lib.b.
Right.
It will build all three of them. And if you do it with deps and build from source, it'll essentially force a new build of each of those, and not just look in the dist folder, but force a rebuild, a refresh.
Well, from my understanding, it will just use the source, for those things,
and not use the dist folder at all.
Yeah, not use the dist folder.
Okay. Whereas if you didn't have that option, it could skip, if the dist folder exists for those libraries, it'll just use that without trying to recompile it.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see. Here's another question. Is there a React Native plugin? Then there isn't one currently that's built into the core of NX. There's not a React Native plugin. There are community plugins and I think we just showed this on the community plugins page. There's one here for Ionic or even Capacitor that are targeting native development solutions.
Right, but that's not React Native. That's Ionic with React.
Yeah. We don't have one. We don't officially support a React Native implementation today. I think we had worked on it at some point.
I think I remember some conversations that I think Jack looked into it and was trying to get it to work. I think there are some issues with React Native expecting to be at the root of of your source folder, and so so there's some technical hurdles we have to get over in order to support React Native. But it's definitely something we're looking into and trying to make it work.
Yeah, and if anyone, like I said, in the chat, or I would say look in the NX community Slack channel, see if there's anyone in there who has tried it also.
Yeah.
Who has maybe gone down that path, and see how far they got with it, and go from there. So our next question is from James. If I have a handful of backend apps, how best would I run these together while developing locally? A bash script that calls ng-serve per app, or one app that runs all the other modules? And so I think, well, I'll let you go. I think I have a good candidate for this one, but if you
so you could use run commands.
Yep.
And let me see if I can find it.
Yep, that's what I was thinking, is using run commands.
Yeah, let's see. Builders, there we go. I'll share my screen.
Yeah, run commands is one of those general purpose utilities that you can use. So I'll let you talk.
Yeah, it's really helpful. So basically, it can run any terminal command. And so you can either run a single command like this, and it'll just execute that. But it sounds like you want to run multiple things. And so you can have a commands option here with an array of as many commands as you want. And then you set parallel either to false or true, whether you want to run sequentially or in parallel. And so probably you want to run them in parallel because you're trying to serve multiple backend applications at once. And then, so then you can have these things run first and then launch your front end application that depends on them.
Yeah, and I think even when we're introducing NX within like an existing repository where they have like a lot of custom build scripts or a lot of custom setup, and you don't migrate everything to builders in one go, you can use run commands to kind of bridge that gap between how you get to using builders for building your apps. And you still, using run command, you still get the caching and all the like the benefits of using NX, even by using the run commands there.
Right. Yep.
Definitely gives you the flexibility to run your own custom scripts for your different targets or different tasks that you maybe already have set up for your different projects.
Yeah, I'm working on an article now for how to migrate an existing React repository into NX, and run commands plays a prominent role in that. So that you don't have to do everything all at once. You can use your existing setup and just run a terminal command to launch it from NX.
Cool. Very cool. So be on the lookout for that. Scan through here. I think we answered most, if not all, the questions here. There's a question. Okay, I guess we already answered that one. They said it was about domain models, but I guess we already answered it. And it's probably has something to do with sharing in between different apps. So yeah, I think we can wrap up there unless anyone has any other questions. As we mentioned before, you know, we have to throw these plugs in here. NX Dev Tools on Twitter. You can follow us there to get updates on releases and articles that we have coming up. As Isaac mentioned, you have one that's how do you use migrate from, I guess it's a create React app, call it workspace to an NX workspace. Yep,
that's the idea. And and so also we could, the article is going to be about, taking create React app application that's set up with Cypress and some other things, and then moving it over into an NX. And the other thing we could do with this time we have left, we could talk about all the correct ways to barbecue, so we can tell Wes while he can't defend himself.
From the stream. Yes, Wes would tell you that barbecue is supposed to be smoked meat, and it's supposed to take 8 hours to cook. But barbecue is supposed to come from a grill. That's where barbecue comes from. It's called a barbecue grill for that specific reason.
So did you barbecue this weekend, Brandon?
Yes, I did. I put some,
nice.
I say I'm going to put some meat on the grill. That's what I I put some meat on the grill, and it was nice.
Good.
It turned out pretty good. So yes, what about you? Since we're talking about, okay.
Yeah, we had some good, well cooked meat.
As opposed to unwell cooked meat. That's
right. There's no raw meat involved.
Yeah, so it was good. We did the whole fireworks thing, and the kids had a good time, and And
Nice.
the people in the neighborhood had fireworks too, so
Right.
it was nice.
Yep.
Yeah, NX Dev Tools on Twitter or at NX Dev Tools. As you can see here, I'm at Brandon T. Roberts. He's at Man Isaac on Twitter, so follow us there. Go to our NX community page, or you can sign up to get emails when we do our next NX office hours session. If you have any questions between here and our next session, feel free to ask them in our community Slack channel. Like I said, the link should be updated there. Slack channel, community page, sign up, get emails. If you haven't already, try out NX Cloud. You get a free tier. There's a free tier that you get 5 hours each month, not 25 hours like Philip said that one time, 5 hours. So be sure to sign up for that. Got to get those plugs in. NX Cloud, free for open source projects. So if you're using NX Cloud and you want to hook up to NX Cloud with your open source project, feel free to take advantage of that. And
Nice.
I think that's it. And we'll see y'all next time. See ya.
All right.